Somewhere deep inside you, you already know this. Thought is not enough. You've visualized, you've imagined, you've rehearsed your desires in the theater of your mind. But if you're honest, it still feels far, as though life keeps you one step away from what you know could be yours. Why? Because you can't think your way into a reality you refuse to feel. Your future cannot respond to logic. It responds to vibration. And vibration is not made of ideas. It's made of emotion. Of the way your breath shifts when you know something belongs to you. Of the calm that washes over you when you stop chasing and start being. Neville Goddard didn't speak to the intellect. He spoke directly to the spirit that remembers. He said imagination creates reality, not because of the picture it paints, but because of the feeling that picture evokes. Thought alone is not the seed. Feeling is the water that brings it to life. Without feeling, your assumptions are hollow. Without emotion, your affirmations are mere noise. This is where most people get lost. They dream, they visualize, they repeat, but inside, they still feel lack. They feel unworthy. And so, nothing shifts. And science agrees. Joe Dispenza shows us that the body doesn't follow what you want. It follows what you feel. The brain may fantasize, but the body is living yesterday, looping emotions of fear, doubt, and survival. You might imagine success, but if your chest still tightens at the thought of money, you're not manifesting wealth. You're rehearsing lack. If your nervous system still braces for abandonment, your dreams of love remain just that, dreams. Because the body believes the past more than the mind believes the future. So many beautiful souls hold detailed visions but silent shame. They visualize abundance while secretly believing they don't deserve it. They dream of peace while emotionally anchored in chaos. This emotional dissonance, this inner contradiction, is the invisible wall. Not your desire, not your intention, but your refusal, often unconscious, to feel worthy now. And that's not your fault. It's a survival habit. A scar shaped by your past, not your essence. But here is the sacred truth. Trying to manifest from thought alone is like trying to cook a meal with only a picture of fire. It looks promising. It feels hopeful. But it never feeds you. The world doesn't respond to what you imagine. It responds to what you embody. And embodiment begins where fantasy ends, in the sacred space of emotion, in the nervous system, in the feeling of I am. That's where your power has been waiting. And so, before we go any further, pause. Let this moment be a doorway. Feel your breath changing. Let that truth settle not just in your mind, but in your chest, your gut, your whole field. This is not about effort. This is about surrendering to a higher frequency that already knows who you are. It's not new. It's remembered. And once remembered, it becomes real. Not someday. Now. You can repeat 1,000 affirmations. You can visualize your dream life every night before sleep. You can fill journal after journal with everything you want. But if your body doesn't believe you, nothing moves. Because it's not your mind that manifests. It's the union of mind and feeling. It's when thought becomes flesh, when the image is soaked in emotion, that reality begins to bend. So many confuse repetition with creation. They loop the same mental images, hoping repetition will convince the universe. But it's not the image alone that imprints the subconscious. It's the emotional charge beneath it. The brain might see the picture, but if the heart doesn't tremble with recognition, if the body doesn't soften into safety, then the signal is weak. The neural pathway doesn't lock in. The vision floats like a balloon with no string, beautiful but untethered. Neville Goddard said it plainly. Feel the reality of the state sought. That's not poetic suggestion. That's a spiritual law. Thought without feeling is a sculpture without breath. You've built the form, but there's no life in it. And the subconscious does not obey empty words. It responds to vibration. What you live, not what you say. It's the limbic system, the emotional brain that determines whether a thought becomes a belief. If the emotion is missing, the thought dies at the surface. But when feeling floods the image, a doorway opens. The brain rewires. The body follows. The world rearranges. Not because you said it enough, but because you became it. So ask not what you think about your future, but how you feel when you imagine it. Is there peace in your chest? Is there certainty behind your eyes, or does your stomach still tighten, bracing for disappointment? This is not judgment. It's a call to deeper honesty, because until you feel it as real, it can't be. There's a seduction in imagining without stepping in. It feels safe to dream as long as you don't fully feel. Because once you feel, you're in. You're exposed. You're vulnerable to disappointment. So instead, many stay in the waiting room of their desires, decorating the walls with vision boards, journaling their dreams in beautiful language, but never crossing the threshold of emotional embodiment. It's not laziness. It's protection. Somewhere inside, your nervous system may still believe it's dangerous to have what you want. That feeling joy now is reckless. That letting yourself believe in love, or abundance, or peace, might open the door to pain. So you hold it at arm's length. You dream vividly, but stay dry, untouched by the river of feeling that would make it real. And that is not weakness. It's a sacred wound, one that only reveals itself when we try to truly feel deserving. Science sees it too. The avoidance of emotional immersion is often a quiet defense. The subconscious has one job: keep you alive, not fulfilled, not expanded, just alive. And if your emotional memory is tied to pain, loss, or lack, then stepping into a new vibration feels like a risk, even if it's what you want, especially if it's what you want. But here's the silent tragedy. When you don't fully feel your desire, you unconsciously reject it. You rehearse the image without installing the identity. And so, nothing sticks. Nothing lands. Because the universe responds not to your rehearsals, but to your readiness. So, what changes it? Not more thinking, not more steps, but a return to the body. Emotional rehearsal. Not just seeing the dream, but letting it move through your breath, your spine, your skin. Feeling the weight of the new keys in your hand. Smelling the morning of your fulfilled life. Letting the sensation of arrival stay long enough to become familiar. Because when it becomes familiar, it becomes safe. And when it's safe, it becomes real. You may want abundance. You may affirm prosperity every morning. You may pray for change with tears in your eyes. But if your body still believes that abundance is unfamiliar, unsafe, or unsustainable, it will resist. Not because you are broken, but because your nervous system has been trained to survive, not to expand. It doesn't trust what it has never known how to hold. This is the hidden conflict behind so many stalled manifestations. You declare a new life, but your cells still vibrate with the memory of scarcity. You envision a healthy relationship, but your chest tightens with the reflex of abandonment. The image and the body are in two different timelines. One is reaching forward, the other is pulling you back. And between the two, nothing moves. Bruce Lipton teaches that the subconscious doesn't respond to logic. It obeys emotional memory. That means your past experiences are still running your present responses, unless you consciously rewire them through feeling. You can't argue your way into abundance. You can only soothe your system into trusting it. And trust isn't built with words. It's built with emotional repetition, with the daily choice to sit inside the energy of what used to feel foreign until it no longer does. So the real question is not, what do I want? But, does my body feel safe having it? Because you will only manifest what you are neurologically able to sustain. If your self-image still sees wealth as dangerous, or love as fleeting, or peace as indulgent, then no matter how loudly you affirm, something inside will say no. But this can change, one calibration at a time. Not through force, but through familiarity. What does safety feel like in the reality you desire? Not conceptually, but physically. In the breath, in the heartbeat, in the moment you stop waiting and start letting it land. That's where the nervous system begins to soften, and when it softens, it receives. Assumption is not pretending. It's rewriting identity. There's a subtle lie that hides behind the phrase, "fake it till you make it." It teaches you to perform a version of yourself you don't yet believe in, to smile over doubt, to act confident while still vibrating with fear. But assumption, as Neville taught, is not a performance. It is not pretending. It is the silent knowing that what you feel inside is more real than what you see outside. It's not about acting as if. It's about being it, inwardly, completely, without needing proof. You don't assume a state by mimicking its behaviors. You assume it by inhabiting its energy. Pretending says, I hope they believe I'm successful. Assumption says, I no longer question that I am. This shift is subtle, but it's the difference between spiritual fatigue and spiritual embodiment. Pretending exhausts you. Assumption liberates you. Doubt is loud when your identity isn't stable. When you try to manifest from a place of almost, Everything requires effort. But when you choose the frequency of the fulfilled self, when you stop waiting for evidence and start writing your reality from the end, you become magnetic. You're no longer begging reality to change. You're broadcasting who you are, without hesitation. This is where language becomes alchemy, not because of what you say, but from where you speak. When you write, "I will become," the future stays out of reach. But when you write, "When I received," something shifts. The mind may hesitate, but the body begins to listen. The timeline shortens. Identity begins to realign. This isn't imagination. This is memory from the future. The subconscious doesn't care about chronology. It responds to emotional conviction. So the more often you feel the new identity is already done, the more the world mirrors that back to you. Not because you tricked it, but because you became undeniable. Not louder, not more perfect. Just already home in your own energy. Before we move on, pause with me for a second. If something inside you is awakening as you listen, if a part of you is finally feeling seen, not just taught, then there's something waiting for you in the pinned comment. It's not more information, it's a quiet invitation, one that aligns with everything you're already starting to remember. When you're ready, it's there. Your feeling is the command to reality. It doesn't matter how detailed your vision board is. It doesn't matter how many hours you meditate or how often you repeat your affirmations. If the feeling behind those rituals is absent, the signal never reaches the deeper layers of your being. The universe doesn't respond to technique, it responds to transmission. And that transmission is feeling. Feeling is the language of the subconscious. It bypasses words, bypasses logic, bypasses effort. It speaks directly to the energetic soil of your identity. Neville called it the secret, not as a mystery but as a mechanism. Because it is the emotional frequency you dwell in, day after day, that commands your external world to reflect back to you what you already carry within. The subconscious mind is not a judge. It does not ask whether what you're feeling is right or true. It simply receives. It listens to the tone of your inner atmosphere and says, "Yes, more of this." This is why so many remain stuck despite spiritual effort. They speak abundance but feel tension. They imagine love, but feel abandonment. They affirm peace, but embody anxiety. The command is not what they intend, it's what they hold emotionally. Think of it like soil. It doesn't matter what kind of seed you speak about, it only matters what kind of seed you plant. And planting happens through feeling. Every time you rise in the morning and choose the feeling of trust, of joy, of arrival, you are planting the future. Not hoping for it, not requesting it, creating it. So let feeling become non-negotiable. Not because emotion is easy, but because emotion is precise. You cannot lie to your own nervous system, but you can train it. You can return again and again to the vibration you choose to live from, not to perform, but to anchor. Because when that feeling becomes familiar, the world cannot help but follow, not out of magic, out of resonance, out of alignment, out of the law that what you feel consistently becomes what you live undeniably. It feels good, doesn't it? That rush after a powerful visualization, the glow you get from writing your affirmations, the emotional high after imagining your dream life. But then, nothing shifts. Hours pass, days, and the glow fades. You're back where you started. It's not because the techniques are wrong, it's because the body was never brought along for the ride. This is the illusion of dopamine, the neurotransmitter that gives us a reward for effort. It floods the brain when we anticipate something, when we think we're making progress. So when you visualize your future, dopamine lights up, giving you the feeling that something is happening. But unless that visualization reaches your nervous system, unless it anchors in your identity, it remains just that, a feeling, a fleeting chemical reward, not a permanent energetic shift. You feel high on hope, but hope without embodiment is empty. You've pacified the mind, but you haven't reprogrammed the self. And so the patterns return. You say the same affirmations. You sit in the same meditations. You wait for the magic to land. But the body still vibrates with the past. The self-image still aligns with the old story. Nothing sticks, because nothing shifted. Neville never told us to perform. He told us to assume. And assumption isn't about intensity. It's about coherence, alignment. The brain, the body, the breath, all tuned to one frequency. It is done. That's where transformation begins, not in the moment of excitement, but in the quiet repetition of emotional embodiment. So combine your words with breath. Let each affirmation be inhaled, not just spoken. Let your body remember the feeling of having what you desire. Recall the future not as fantasy, but as memory, because when the body believes it, the field around you changes. Reality begins to shift, not because you tried harder, but because the illusion of performance dissolved, and the truth of embodiment took its place. You've read the books, you've watched the videos, you understand the laws. Mentally, you know the principles. You could even teach them. But inside, there's a gap, a silent distance between what you know and what you actually live, between the concept of being abundant and the felt sense of already being it. This is where so many powerful souls remain suspended, caught between theory and embodiment. It's not ignorance. It's not lack of desire. It's that the nervous system hasn't caught up. The intellect may grasp the truth, but the body still braces for the old story. And so, there's a quiet desperation that begins to grow. A frustration that says, why hasn't it clicked yet? Not realizing that transformation doesn't come from intellectual understanding, it comes from installing a new energetic baseline. And that takes more than information. It takes integration. This is the moment where many give up, not because they're wrong, but because they're trying to leap too far, too fast. They want to live from the end, but they haven't practiced the middle. They haven't anchored the new self in their breath, in their posture, in their everyday silence. They want the result, but they haven't rehearsed the frequency. It's not about grand rituals. It's about consistent state installation, little shifts, subtle adjustments. Feeling the energy of I am not once a week, but every time you walk into a room, every time you open your wallet, every time you choose your words. It's not about proving. It's about returning to the vibration of who you already are. There was a man who built a business not from strategy, but from identity. He stopped focusing on the numbers. He started rehearsing how it would feel to be the man after the breakthrough. His breath slowed. His presence deepened. He didn't visualize the goals. He embodied the self, and everything followed. Because when the nervous system is aligned, the universe has no choice but to respond, not to what you hope for, but to who you've become. Hope is soft. It's gentle. It gives you permission to want, but it also keeps you at a distance, because hope vibrates with waiting, with possibility, not presence. It says, maybe one day. It says, if I'm lucky. It says, I'm still trying. And in that vibration, the future stays just out of reach, like a shadow you can see, but never touch. There's nothing wrong with hope. It can be the beginning, but it cannot be the foundation. Because what you truly seek doesn't respond to wishing. It responds to embodiment. The moment you stop hoping and begin living as if, your entire field changes. Not because something outside shifts first, but because your assumption rearranges the timeline. This shift is quiet. It doesn't announce itself. It doesn't need external validation. It's the moment you walk differently, not because someone is watching, but because the self you've assumed carries a new rhythm. It's the way you open your emails, the way you sit in silence, the way you stop asking, when will it come, and begin breathing from the knowing it already has. To embody is to eliminate negotiation, to decide, energetically, emotionally, that the desire is no longer a request. It is a recognition, a return, a remembering of what you already carry. And from that state, there is no more waiting. There is only alignment. Pick one area of your life where you've been holding on to hope, not from fear, but from love. Release it, not because it doesn't matter, but because it does. And because what matters most deserves more than hope. It deserves your full frequency. It deserves embodiment. Now, most people feel the absence, not the arrival. You sit quietly and visualize. You see the house. You see the relationship. You see the number in your bank account. You craft the scene with care, with precision, with hope. But beneath it, where the breath hides, where the nervous system speaks in silence, there's a different emotion running the show. It's not the feeling of arrival. It's the ache of not yet. It's the subtle tension of absence. This is the emotional conflict that goes unnoticed in most manifestation practices. You create the image of what you want, but you feel its distance. You visualize the partner, but your chest tightens with loneliness. You affirm financial freedom, but your stomach clenches every time you check your account. And so, even as your conscious mind paints one reality, your emotional body reinforces another. The frequency you emit is not of fulfillment, it's of longing. And longing, as tender and spiritual as it may feel, is still lack. This is where the deeper understanding begins. Because you are not being punished, you're not failing. You're simply rehearsing what the body remembers best. Separation. That's how we've been trained, to define ourselves by what we don't yet have. It's woven into our language, our emotions, our stories. The future becomes a destination that's always a few steps away, and the present becomes a space of waiting. But manifestation doesn't respond to what you picture. It responds to what you feel consistently, not the flashes of joy during a technique, but the ambient emotional tone of your days, your baseline, the feeling you return to when you're not trying. That is the gravitational pull of your reality. So if you imagine abundance but emotionally dwell in fear, the universe responds to fear. If you visualize love but return to unworthiness, the vibration is still unworthiness. Neville Goddard knew this. He didn't teach you to ask. He taught you to assume. An assumption is not a wish. It's an inner shift. It's what happens when you stop touching the dream with your fingertips and instead step into it with your whole being. It's what happens when the future stops being something you reach for and becomes something you remember. So how do you shift from absence to arrival? It begins with the body, because the body is always honest, and it doesn't need grand rituals. It needs emotional coherence. The most powerful practice isn't imagining the moment it arrives. It's feeling the day after it already has. That quiet, grounded energy. That exhale. That ordinary magic. Imagine waking up the morning after your deepest desire has been fulfilled. There are no fireworks. No audience. Just you. Breathing. Moving through your day with a new frequency. No more proving. No more asking. Just presence. That's the emotion that rewires your field. That's the signal the subconscious listens to. And it's not forced. It's gentle. It's subtle. You don't have to trick yourself. You have to let yourself feel. How would your posture change? What would your thoughts sound like if you no longer had to hope, because it was already done? What would your nervous system feel like if your manifestation wasn't a question, but a memory? This is where reality begins to respond. Reverse imaging isn't fantasy. It's energetic programming. It gives your body a template, a new rhythm, one that replaces the constant hum of not yet with the settled pulse of already here. Because your subconscious doesn't care about time. It doesn't ask, is this true yet? It simply anchors to whatever you feel with the most consistency. And feeling the arrival doesn't mean pretending. It means aligning. It means choosing a new emotional home and moving in. Letting that new self-image brush against your routines. Letting it show up in your voice, in your walk, in your silence, until it's no longer something you do, but someone you are. The shift is not always immediate. It's a retraining, a return. Every time you catch yourself feeling the absence, breathe. Not to suppress it, but to witness it, to meet it with compassion. Then, gently, come back to the residue of arrival. Rehearse the normalcy of your dream fulfilled. Let it be mundane. Let it be embodied. Because it's not in the grand emotion that identity stabilizes. It's in the repeated calm, the subtle trust, the emotional memory that says, I no longer chase this, I carry it. And that's when the universe begins to reflect. Not because you manipulated it, but because you finally aligned with it. Not because you begged louder, but because you spoke its language. Emotion, arrival, presence. And once you dwell there, reality has no choice but to meet you. You don't get what you desire. You get what you can emotionally maintain. Desire is powerful. It awakens something deep within, a glimpse of what's possible, a remembrance of who you really are. But desire alone doesn't create. It initiates. It invites. What truly shapes your life is not what you want, but what you can emotionally hold, because the universe doesn't respond to your wish. It responds to your capacity. This is the truth many overlook. They focus on the moment of visualization, on the ritual of asking, on the technique of commanding reality. But the question that actually matters is quieter, more intimate. Can you stay there? Can you hold the vibration of the fulfilled self, not just in meditation, but in traffic, in conversation, in silence? Can you emotionally maintain the energy of the life you're calling in? This is where most people falter, not in dreaming, but in sustaining, because it's easy to feel rich for 5 minutes. It's easy to feel love while watching a romantic vision unfold in your mind. It's easy to feel peace in the controlled space of a meditation. But when life presses in, when old triggers appear, when the world doesn't immediately mirror your new identity, can you still hold it? Neville Goddard made it clear. The test of assumption is not in effort, it's in persistence. The subconscious is not changed by flashes of emotion, but by repetition of state. Who do you return to when you're not watching? What identity holds you in the background of your life? Your emotional baseline is the gravitational field of your reality. No matter how high you rise in peak moments, you will always fall back to your default state. That's the secret most don't speak of. You don't get what you visit, you get what you live in. If your inner world still carries the identity of someone struggling, someone waiting, someone chasing, then even the most beautiful vision will collapse under the weight of emotional contradiction. This is not punishment, it's precision. The universe is exact. It reflects what you are able to consistently be, not what you perform, not what you post, what you feel in the unseen hours, what you embody when no one is looking. So the question is not, how can I get what I want? It's, how can I become someone who naturally lives in that frequency? Not just temporarily, but effortlessly, sustainably. Because when you stabilize the feeling of wealth, you don't need signs. It becomes self-evident. When you carry the vibration of love, it no longer feels like something you're attracting. It feels like something you've always known. Emotional stamina isn't about intensity. It's about subtle, sacred consistency. It's the quiet decision to not return to the old frequency, even when it calls you. It's the devotion to your new identity, not just in thought, but in tone, in posture, in reaction. This is how new timelines are birthed, not through dramatic action, but through daily emotional resonance. You don't need to be perfect, you don't need to be high vibe all the time, but you do need to build a new emotional center of gravity, one that no longer collapses into lack when the evidence is slow to appear, one that no longer abandons its assumption in the face of delay, one that lives from "I already am," no matter what the world says. Because when you can hold it, you become it. And once you become it, reality has no option but to obey. Not because it's magic, but because it's law. Because what you consistently feel, you inevitably live. Only emotion makes imagination real to the subconscious. At the core of all transformation lies one truth. Imagination is only the beginning. Emotion is what makes it real. Neville called it the secret, not as a mystery but as a key, because the subconscious doesn't respond to what you visualize. It responds to what you feel. Feeling is the substance that turns thought into form. You can close your eyes and picture your dream life, but if your body still trembles with fear, if your chest tightens with doubt, the subconscious receives that frequency, not the image. It listens to the emotional tone beneath the scene. So unless the feeling matches the vision, the manifestation remains suspended. Longing without embodiment becomes delay. This is where most get lost. They imagine vividly but stay emotionally outside the picture. They want to believe, but never move in. Emotionally, they still live in waiting rooms, outside the life they say is already theirs. But there's no power in watching your dream from a distance. The transformation happens when you enter it, when you breathe it in, when you let your nervous system experience it as familiar, not foreign. Joe Dispenza reveals why this matters. A brain in survival can't hold the frequency of the future. If your system still lives in fight or flight, your vision becomes a threat, not a home. You can't receive what you don't feel safe having. That's why manifestation is less about action and more about regulation. You're not convincing reality. You're calming your system enough to match it. So don't just imagine. Feel it as if it's memory. Don't wait for the door to open. Move in emotionally. Light the fire. Let your body remember the weight of peace, the pace of ease, the breath of abundance, not just once, but until it becomes your new baseline. Because when the feeling stabilizes, reality no longer resists, not because you earned it, but because you became compatible with it. And once you do, you don't have to force the future. You simply live from it. It becomes natural, effortless, inevitable. The shift is quiet but unmistakable. From performing your desire to being its embodiment, from hope to memory, from seeking to knowing. And once you feel that, it is done. Not someday, now. And if something inside you wants to go deeper, pause for a moment and check the pinned comment. You'll know why when you do.